Welcome back to class, everyone. I am so incredibly thrilled you're joining us for this explainer today, because we are stepping right into a true Constitutional Law 101 masterclass. We're unpacking a massive, landmark decision from 1960, the Berubari Union Case. If you're someone who loves legal puzzles, high-stakes diplomacy, and those deep, foundational questions about what actually makes a nation, well, you are in the exact right place. So grab your notebooks, because this case, it's an absolute cornerstone of Indian constitutional law. Okay, let's dive right into this, and I want to put you in the hot seat for a second. Imagine you are running the government. Can a prime minister simply sign a piece of paper and give away national territory to another country? Does the executive branch have that kind of absolute power, or is there a heavy constitutional lock on the front door of the nation? Keep that question in the back of your mind, because that's the exact crisis this entire explainer revolves around.
Here's our syllabus for today. First, we'll look at the 1947 border dispute. Second, the constitutional dilemma. Third, the Supreme Court verdict. Fourth, a little something I like to call the preamble plot twist. And finally, the legacy of the case.
All right, Chapter 1, the 1947 border dispute. Let's set the scene. So the root of this whole legal saga actually starts back in 1947. When India and Pakistan were partitioned, the border was drawn up by what was known as the Radcliffe Award. But, drawing lines on a map is incredibly messy. Some areas became highly disputed just because the boundary wasn't clear at all. Fast forward 11 years to 1958, and the leaders of both nations, Indian Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru and Pakistani Prime Minister Firoz Khan Noon, they try to finally fix this mess by signing an agreement. But by 1960, this diplomatic fix had landed straight in the lap of the Supreme Court. So what exactly did they agree to? Well, the 1958 Nehru-Noon Agreement stated that India would transfer a part of the Berubari Union, which was located over in West Bengal, to Pakistan. And in return, both countries would exchange certain territorial enclaves. Basically, these were pockets of land totally surrounded by the other country's territory. Now, giving away the Berubari Union was meant to be this peaceful diplomatic resolution. But as we're about to see, it became the catalyst for a massive constitutional crisis.
Which brings us to Part 2, the constitutional dilemma. Put yourself in the shoes of the Indian government in the late 1950s. You've got this international agreement signed, but suddenly, bam, you hit a giant constitutional roadblock at home. There were intense, serious doubts about whether the government actually had the legal power to just hand over land. So the president invoked a presidential reference under Article 143(1). Now, this is basically a tool where the president can seek an advisory opinion from the Supreme Court whenever there's a crucial legal or constitutional doubt. For you citation nerds out there taking notes, this became known as AIR 1960 SC 845. The president was essentially asking the highest court in the land to review the government's homework before they actually handed over any sovereign territory.
And the president presented the Supreme Court with a very specific, high-stakes exam. 3 main questions. First, is legislation even required to implement the Indo-Pakistan Agreement? Second, if it is required, is an ordinary law under Article 3 sufficient? Or third, is a full-blown constitutional amendment under Article 368 absolutely necessary? The tension here was just immense. I mean, passing an ordinary law is relatively straightforward, but amending the Constitution, that is a monumental task that requires special majorities.
All right, Part 3, the Supreme Court verdict, the climax of our legal masterclass.
And this brilliantly illustrates the core of the court's analysis, which really came down to 2 articles. Think of Article 3, which deals with internal reorganization, so creating new states, altering boundaries, or changing names within India. It's kind of like your house. You can rearrange the furniture, maybe knock down an interior wall to make a bigger living room. No problem. But Article 368, the power to amend the Constitution itself, that is what's required when you are literally giving a whole room of your house away to your neighbor.
Consequently, the Supreme Court delivered a very, very firm conclusion. Article 3 is not enough. The court explicitly held that Article 3 only allows Parliament to reorganize states internally, within India. It absolutely does not allow Parliament to just transfer Indian territory to a foreign country using some ordinary law. The easy way was officially blocked.
Instead, the court ruled that if India wants to cede or give away any part of its territory to a foreign country, a constitutional amendment under Article 368 is strictly mandatory. You just cannot alter the sovereign borders of the nation without amending the very bedrock of the nation's legal document itself. The Nehru-Noon Agreement simply couldn't just be rubber-stamped.
Now for Part 4,
the preamble plot twist.
Lean in close for this one, class, because the Berubari Union Case is actually famous for something else entirely. We've got a bit of a scandalous mid-lecture plot twist regarding the preamble. Listen to this quote from the 1960 Supreme Court judgment. The preamble is not a part of the Constitution. It cannot itself confer powers or impose limitations. Yeah, you heard that right. In 1960, the highest court in the land officially declared that those beautiful, iconic opening words of the Constitution were not actually a legally binding part of the document. They reasoned it was just a helpful guide for clearing up ambiguity, but it wasn't a source of power itself.
But, constitutional law is a living, breathing, evolving beast. And here is where the plot twists. Overruled. 13 years later, in the massive 1973 case of Kesavanda Bharati v. State of Kerala, the Supreme Court completely reversed this stance. They officially ruled that the preamble is, without a doubt, a part of the Constitution. So, while Berubari gave us the first major opinion on the preamble, it's honestly mostly remembered today as the case that got the preamble completely wrong.
Finally, Part 5, Legacy of the Case. Let's bring it all together.
Let's synthesize what we've learned and look at the direct aftermath of the court's ruling. Step 1. The Supreme Court mandates that an amendment is required, and the government? They didn't ignore it. They obediently followed the law. Step 2. Parliament rolls up its sleeves and formally passes the 9th Constitutional Amendment Act of 1960. And finally, Step 3. With the Constitution properly amended, the agreed-upon territory was legally transferred to Pakistan. The rule of law was upheld perfectly.
So, what are your core takeaways from this explainer? What's going to be on the final exam? First, the Berubari Union Case permanently drew a hard line, clarifying the difference between internal state reorganization and actually ceding national territory to a foreign power. Second, it made an Article 368 constitutional amendment absolutely mandatory for giving away land. And third, it provided the crucial first judicial opinion on the preamble's legal status, even if, it was later corrected.
I want to leave you with a take-home exam question to really ponder. If internal borders can be easily shifted around by ordinary law, but touching external borders requires the absolute highest constitutional hurdles, what does this tell us about the ultimate power and the permanence of a nation's sovereign identity? It shows us that while a government can manage the inside of the house however it sees fit, the outer walls, those belong to the Constitution itself. Think about that delicate balance of power. Thank you so much for joining me in class today for this explainer. Keep studying, keep questioning, and I'll see you next time.